Hi, everyone. We are here with Dialogues with Dozy. I am Janis Hazel. I'm in Detroit, and we are going to be joined by your host, Dozell Varner, who is coming to you live in just a few moments. Tonight's topic is going to be delving into those people who have a platform and how do they use it. And by platform, we mean the prominent people who have risked it all for social justice causes. A lot of times we call them celebrities or notable or those with notoriety. Those are people who we see all the time on television. We hear them on the radio, or now we hear them on podcasts. We see them on billboards. We watch them at concerts. We go to see them perform. We go to see them at the basketball courts. We go to see them on the football field. We watch them playing tennis on television. We go to tennis matches. These are all people that we see that are out in the public eye. And so when we talk about platforms and using it or using their megaphone, we're going to explore from the 1960s to present day the civil unrest, the civil rights. Various movements that have gotten us, meaning us, Black Americans, the right to vote, the Civil Rights Act of 1964, the Voting Rights Act of 1965. I had the honor and the privilege of working for Congressman John Conyers of Detroit, Michigan, for many years, who was the architect of the Voting Rights Act of 1965. And right before he was elected, he was working with Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. He was working with Mrs. Rosa Parks, who, after he won his first election, Mrs. Rosa Parks came to work for him in his Detroit office until she retired. So I had an opportunity to work with those two icons, those two legends that led these movements, but they were joined by people such as Berry Gordy, who was the founder and president, chief executive officer for many years of Motown Records, which was right here in Detroit, Michigan. Someone who was behind the scenes, who was helping to fund a lot of the movements. When Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King needed money for air travel or to pay for rent for where they were going, or any of the different marches that they were doing at that time, you had people who were making money at that point in time, such as Mr. Berry Gordy of Motown Records, such as Diane Carroll, such as Eartha Kitt, those actresses, Sammy Davis Jr., actors. We had Lena Horne. These were all in the 1960s because those people were celebrities, quote unquote, or people of prominence that had the financial wherewithal to also help to pay for the much needed resources to mount the civil rights movement. So we're going to explore more of the role that they had. Many of you may know about the March on Washington. And oh, we've just been joined by our illustrious host. I was just telling them, or about to tell them, about the March on Washington, but the preview for that was in Detroit. June 23rd, 1963. My parents went to that march, and Berry Gordy recorded it, the speeches. So the preview speech, I Have a Dream speech, that Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King did in August in Washington, D.C., he did it first in June in Detroit, Michigan, and had a crowd of over, I believe, 250,000 people who marched through downtown Detroit right after that speech. So welcome to the host.
Hey, thanks, Jan, and thanks, team, and thanks, Jan, for agreeing again at the 11th hour. We got an exciting topic tonight. It's looking at people in our generation who have in the generation below us. So what's that, Jan? Gen X, or what's the next generation down? What
Well,
would be
you've
our
got your millennials, you've got your
millenniums?
Gen
That's
X, I think it's your Gen X, your millennials, your Gen Z, Gen Y. Um, there's a number of them. So the baby boomers are still around, live and kicking. And there are many of the great generation that are still
okay.
here. I have
So
a
whatever that generation is classified below us. Uh, Hey, welcome to the Nice Dialogue. We had you in mind. Janice brought you up from people who have put it all on the line for social justice causes for our benefits. And I heard her talking about the Dr. King's August 1963 speech. And uh, we stayed with Janice when she was working in D.C., in the Capitol, at her home for the Million Man March, where a lot of, and I'm just going to use the term celebrities, athletes, uh, movie stars, singers. You think of the Sidney Poitiers, the Harry Belafontes, the Stevie Wonders of the world, a modern day like uh, Yellow Pain, who's got the video to encourage young people to get out and vote. We got the Miami Heat team from 2013 that protested the murder of Dwayne of Trayvon Martin, and they wore their hoodies. I think they may have made the promotional poster. All of these people, and I'm missing so many. Jan, who was the tennis star that you brought attention to?
Naomi
Osaka.
Osaka. She's the highest paid woman athlete in the world at this point in time. She has surpassed Serena and Venus Williams. So Naomi Osaka, she actually represents Japan. She has dual citizenship. Her father is American, African American, and her mother is Japanese. And so she went under or goes under the Japanese banner in
So
representing Japan for tennis.
So she has taken a knee for causes, and who can forget Colin Kaepernick, who we know put it on the line. Now Kurt Flood maybe a little bit dated. He's right at the 60s. He gave up an illustrious baseball career protesting, and now baseball enjoys free agency. Hey, attention has been brought to police homicides across, not police being killed, but police in questionable shootings and murders of blacks across the nation. Uh, that's what Colin Kaepernick brought to the attention before it was popular, before everybody got on the 2020 bandwagon after the murder of George Floyd. And he has basically, essentially lost his football career. But he did it to bring notice to a cause. And tonight we want to look at and question the causes and the effects of what they've done, and really just give them kudos. Jen, dial in.
Now, what was that?
Just dial in. Are you able to hear me?
Yeah, yeah, I can hear you.
Oh,
Hmm.
listen, for everybody, I'm so grateful to our team, Madam Producer, Toya and a illustrious team, and Jen, who's here. I literally just got off the road from Northwest Florida. If you all don't know, there's a lot of things going on weather-wise, and the whole state is almost
Yes.
at attention and at a standstill. I passed so many emergency vehicles on the way into this
Mm.
Jacksonville studio. AKA Anthony and Mama's house, um, to for tonight's dialogue. And Jay, just weigh in on our topic a little bit more. Anybody you
Well, I was
want?
talking right before you jumped in, was talking about the March on Washington, which we had the 50th anniversary on it. We're coming up on the 55th March on Washington, the anniversary next year. But the preview to that, as I was saying, was in Detroit 2 months before that. And Barry Gordy, the founder and president of Motown Records, helped to finance a lot of the movement, along with people who were making more money than most at that point in time, such as actors and athletes. So you had, as I was saying, Diane Carroll, Eartha Kitt, Sammy Davis Jr., Lena Horne. And then let's just talk about the Motown legacy of putting it on the line. Smokey Robinson, an incredibly gracious gentleman that I've had the opportunity to work with. He and his wife that were the founders of the Miracles, which we know them as Smokey Robinson and the Miracles. Well, I've talked with Smokey on many occasions. I produced events that he has participated in, and he talked about in the 60s when they were doing the Motortown reviews around the country. And in the southern states, he noticed looking out in the audience that the Black teenagers were separated by a rope and stanchion, a rope and they call it rope and stanchion, that was in between the black teenagers, which were most of the people in the audience, and the white teenagers that were in the audience. And at a certain point, Smokey Robinson, he stood up and he said, hey, unless you take those ropes down, those barriers between the black teenagers in the audience and the white teenagers, I am not going to perform. We are not going to perform. Those were the miracles. And so that started some integration just for people going to concerts. Think about that. You know, I think about it. I have on a t-shirt today, One Nation Under a Groove, Parliament Funkadelic. And just think about concerts prior to the 1970s, that they were segregated. And I mean, I love going to concerts. I produce concerts. And to think that the audience was actually segregated by a line, a rope, a barrier. So, you know, Smokey Robinson, the venue owners could have stood by their contract and not paid them. But eventually, you know, the students, they didn't really care. You know, it was all about their parents and society at large at that point in time that were segregationists. But those teenagers, which are now baby boomers now, moving into their 70s and 80s, they, you know, just wanted to hear the wonderful music of those Motown acts. So that was an act of defiance and an act of disruption at that point in time, that a musician, think about it, a musician, a composer, actually integrated, help with integration just by standing up and saying, I won't perform if you don't allow these children, these students, these teenagers to freely enjoy this performance together.
So Jan, I wonder for our Gen X, Gen Y, and all of that crowd that you listed, all of those above, children of the '90s and the 2000s. I think, you know, maybe one of the movies that would have caught their attention was Cadillac Records. I saw there where there was some who did not having audio having problems here, but I saw on that where the performers, just as you mentioned, did just that. I wonder, how do we translate that legacy to our brothers and sisters of the day, to know just what price has been paid. Um, if YouTube would have been invented in those days, they would not have been allowed on YouTube. They could not have advertised on Facebook or Twitter. Uh, how do we translate to this generation the price that has been paid and what they put on the line? Smokey and Barry Gordon, who was, you know, in the background. How do we put that on the line? How do we let our this generation know what has happened so they'd have a great appreciation for where we are
You know,
today?
I'll lean into conversations that I had with one very, very notable person who put everything on the line to speak to the Vietnam War. Okay, and that is Muhammad Ali. I enjoyed a friendship with Muhammad Ali. He lived here in Michigan part time when he wasn't traveling. And for those younger people, those who are younger than, I would say, 50, may not be aware that he was stripped of his heavyweight champion of the world title because of his conviction of not wanting to go into the military and go to be deployed in Vietnam and fight the Viet Cong, which he had said. And we're on the internet, we're not on broadcast, so you can say the N word. But Muhammad Ali said to the powers that be, all of the top brass of the army, basically to the president of the United States, I will not go and fight people who have done nothing to me. And he said, a very famous quote that Muhammad Ali said was, a Viet Cong has never called me the N word, unlike people here in the United States who have. And so he refused to, he enlisted, but he refused to go and be deployed. So he was put in jail. He was stripped of his title, even though everyone knows that he fought and won his boxing match. But for several years, he had to really humble himself. He was not earning money. So his wife at that time was the breadwinner of the household. She had to dip into her college fund because she was younger than Muhammad Ali and was going to go to college just to maintain their household. But through that, he continued, and he went to the Supreme Court and said that, it was a violation of his rights, his religious right to practice his religion, which he had joined the Nation of Islam. And he said that the only person who could compel him to fight would be Allah. And so, for younger people who may or may not take part in any of the protests or social unrest, there is a reparations march that I am working on that will be held October 16th in Washington, D.C. I hope that everyone will make it to make our views known to the president that we want a reparations commission, a study, and for the Congress to start looking at how it can provide funds to those of us descended of enslaved Africans in this country. Our ancestors never got any compensation for their wages for over 400 years. And so that is a civil unrest. That is a march that is being planned right now. March 16th, 2022, Washington, D.C., at the White House. And so
Okay.
risking it on the line. Yes, all of us, even now, going to do that could be labeled. But you know what? I'm at a point where I'm really tired of being told just wait. I'm at a point where I'm tired of being, now is not
So
the time politically. When is the time? And as you know, we've talked about it here before. 33 years ago, I served on the staff of Congressman John Conyers and helped to write the first reparations bill, which became H.R. 40, which has been reintroduced every congressional session. And so people might be thinking, well, if I go, maybe my company, my job might not like it, but what do you stand for? If you don't stand for anything, you'll fall for anything, right? And
so
something that the tennis pro now, who she's in her 20s, Naomi Osaka, has said is being silent is never the answer. You're complicit if you are not saying something when you see injustices. And that's what those people who came before us did. They put it on the line. Eartha Kitt was blackballed. She had to leave the country, the United States, in order to get work because of her position on social justice issues. So you think about a Black woman in the 1950s and 1960s standing up to Lyndon Baines Johnson, President Lyndon Baines Johnson. She was invited to the White House in 1968 um, to uh,
so
lunch with Lady Bird Johnson, the
so
first lady of the
so
United States. And she just said to the president, hey, hey, ho, ho, how many children have you killed, today? Which they took offense to that, but she was saying, Vietnam, you're killing our children, right?
so
And after that, she was blackballed. She couldn't
so
work
so
in the
this
United States.
so this conversation, sorry to cut in, this conversation weighs in on what we're seeing, just so that our audience can have some idea and some way to relate to what's going on. Just look at the national news and you'll see protests over right now in Moscow, parts of Russia, because the Russian government, who is losing, or at least being their war is not going their way in Ukraine, and so they've had so many losses, and they've almost had people to just the soldiers just to just abandon their posts and head back. You see the pictures. That's not propaganda. That's real. They're leaving their tanks and their weaponry behind. And so what Russia is doing now is that they are actually hunting people down and taking them, literally putting them in basic training, a rush version of training to get them back on the in the war. Well, so Ali and people like him, people like you here, and Jan bringing attention to the government. You've heard the term "speak truth to power." Sometimes, uh, sometimes it takes a big name to bring attention to a matter. That's just the fact of life for what it is. Um, you and I going and marching down Pennsylvania Avenue, one or two or three of us, uh, DC police probably would whisk us off the street. Would you let them know that uh, uh, LeBron James is out there. Let them know. Let them know that young Jock is out there, or let them know that there's somebody who's more mainstream. Let them know that Ice T is out there. Let them know that Cube's out there. I guarantee you'll be a different reaction. So, for people that have done that and put it on the line, hey, my hats off to you guys and girls. You are making a difference. I was talking a little bit earlier, Jan, about the Trayvon Martin death, and we happened to have been in Orlando that night when he was murdered by Zimmerman there in Sanford, which is nearby. And the first thing the Miami Heat did was they reacted by wearing hoodies to relate to Trayvon, who wore hoodies all the time, and they had bags of Skittles in their hand, and they took publicity pictures. And the Miami Heat's organization supported them. And then one of the posters that Madam Producer had was the picture of Dwayne Wade and LeBron James at the Knicks Awards program, where they bowed their heads in solidarity with with Trayvon's family, Sabrina Martin and the family, Trayvon's father and everybody and brother and that family. And it was a movement that kind of, from there we saw Ferguson, and from Ferguson, it just escalated. We saw the brother in Minneapolis shot down because the police officer was scared, and it continued on while the same simultaneous the Colin Kaepernick protest began in 2016, and you saw what happened to him. But he had a whole team behind him. They couldn't do the whole team. Um, so we just commend people who have a lot to lose. And Colin Kaepernick lost. Thankfully, Muhammad. You know what's ironic? You spoke of your personal knowing Ali and knowing him personally. What is so ironic is that when he came back, he was able to maintain his level of proficiency in the ring for a few years. He won the title, lost it, won it back, lost it again, and then he had a couple of high-profile fights. But he went on to become a beloved figure in America. And I just saw a special on Dick Ebersol the other day of NBC Sports where he narrated when Ali was with Parkinson's kicking in, when he lit the Atlanta Olympic torch, and he was a beloved figure at that point. When, Janice, we're not hearing you.
I'm sorry.
Okay.
I had to unmute myself. Um, and I'm very sorry. I had a little split attention there. Something I want to say is, yes, indeed, we see many people who are of a younger generation who are have a huge platform when you talk about a LeBron James, and I don't want to put everything on his shoulders. But those younger generations, and I'm talking black and white, Hispanic, and other ethnic groups and racial groups who are out here protesting. Some of them are keyboard gangsters. They're on social media saying things, but they're not risking what those in the 60s risked. They're not standing up and standing out because really the United States only understands money. It's the only thing that it really understands. It's the great equalizer on certain levels. And so for me, the B word is always boycott. It's always take your money away from those who are not respecting you. Okay. And so when you've got a Michael Jordan, you've got a LeBron James, you've got all of these individuals who, you have what is his name now? Sean Combs, is it P. Diddy, whatever he's going by, that have branded items. They have a lot of liquor branded items, clothing lines. But you see, they're not the manufacturer, they're not the importer, it's their name on it. And see, what I believe that Black people who are largely disrespected in this country and any other group, you need to pull your money back. You need to stop buying all of these non essential items to show America what our power is. And when we look at Black Americans, our GDP is in the billions of dollars, if not trillions, which equates to other countries. Our spending power in the United States is that of another country
Let me,
in
let me,
total.
let me, Jan, let me ask you right here. right there on that point. How do we do that? Well, we
We
enjoy now.
stop.
You and I. So
We
we're
stop. We stop
so
consuming those
so
goods that we don't need. Yes, you have to pay your
so
rent. Yes, you have to pay your mortgage.
so.
Yes, you have to pay your auto insurance and your car note if you have one. If your children in school, you got to pay that. But you don't need Jordans. You
But
certainly don't
so
need a
you
new
and I,
one every
you
year.
you
You don't need
you
all
and
of
I,
this
and let
branded items. You don't need Ciroc. You need all of that
okay.
stuff.
Let's
And
hold
that is
Jordan.
how you
Let's
gain
come back to
attention.
Jordan. Let's come back to Jordan. You and I are children of segregation to fought for integration.
Hmm.
When what happened was, and this is a whole nother discussion, but when we were able, let's see, were you able as a child to go to Belle Isle?
Yes, yes.
Okay,
Could go to Belle
well,
Isle, which is an island inside the city of Detroit,
right. So
a part.
before, I'm sure your dad and mom were not afforded that privilege. Okay, but what happens is that when we're able to go to Belle Isle, we leave Bubba's bounce house because it's greater. It's a nuance, something we've not done before. It offers some amenities maybe that our local neighborhood entertainment. And I'm just obviously making a exaggerated point, but because I can look at I'm a citizen basically of two communities, Jacksonville and Fort Lauderdale.
Hmm.
Uh, Florida Avenue was a thriving community. Myrtle Avenue was thriving communities. Even when I left Jacksonville in the late '70s, Trunk Boulevard in Fort Lauderdale was thriving. Great black businesses. Um, they died when you could go out to the malls, when you could come across the water over at the Regency Mall, because and I just wonder if that's a fallacy on our part. I mean, once we got a taste of something different and was more, is it a fallacy that we, instead of us assimilating and pushing business, helping push businesses across the water, so to speak, and get involved? I question it. I see places making, Trunk is making a revival. One of our former state senators, Chris Smith, has got a thriving uh, sports bar. Basically, it's a sports bar, wing hut on Trunk, and it's bringing millions of people, not millions, but hundreds of people back into Trunk and the libraries and everything. But is that wrong on our part, or if it's the wrong thing to do, how do we recondition us not to do that?
Unmute. It's easy. We pull back. I am a child that goes between the 60s, 70s, and 80s. Those were my growing up years. And while I did not face discrimination and segregation like my parents did, I did face some, even here in the North. Going to events, with my brother, who happens to be a fair skinned Black man with green eyes, sometimes going into venues, you know, the powers that be, a white doorman, white security guard, um, would let my brother in, but not me because I'm darker. So I've seen that happen. And I say to the younger people, and I'm bring this into the fold, when I see certain statements that younger Black celebrities or prominent people are saying, not all, but many, along with whites that are allies, and they'll say it on social media. So the first thing that they type up, they mean it. But then they think about, whoa, or maybe their agent or manager or whomever within their network says, you should delete that because it could come back to haunt you. And they do. So they're not putting it all on the line like the generation before us did. We're talking about a man like a Muhammad Ali who got stripped of his title that he won. We all saw him win it. He was barred from boxing. That was his job. He was stripped of his boxing license, and he weathered that out for us, for us. And I see younger people, just the mere fact they put a statement out about how they really felt about an action such as a George Floyd being murdered, and they make a statement on social media and then they delete it. You'll go and see it on their account. Sometimes the media will have gotten a screenshot of it, so it lasts for infinity, but they'll delete it. So you're not putting much on the line, unlike those prominent people before us who couldn't work, were blackballed. And so when I say boycott, I mean, that's where you show your power. That's truly putting your money where your mouth is. When you stop, we saw during this 2 years of the pandemic, before we got, mitigation methods that could tamp it down a little bit. We still have a pandemic for COVID, but it's not as bad as it was in 2020 and 2021. We saw the retraction of our economy because people were staying home. People were cooking at home. People were not dining out. People were not buying extras. They certainly weren't going to entertainment venues, whether that was a concert venue or whether that was an athletic venue, because they were shut down. And the economy started having challenges, and we're still dealing with that. Just think about how, if Black people were to make a statement to say, you will not mistreat me, you will not treat me as a second or third class citizen, and not spend the money in this economy, you'll start seeing changes. Because during the first year of the COVID-19, we saw corporations that started embracing Black Lives Do Matter. Major corporations embracing DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion, starting whole departments, universities starting departments. Cornell University, for instance, has a department. Georgetown, George Washington University, Harvard University now have diversity, equity, and inclusion departments, because the the band-aid was ripped off so hard when we saw a man murdered in front of us, which is George Floyd. We've been seeing these before. Let's go back 30 years ago with Rodney King.
Rodney
We saw
King.
that on video, but they told us that it wasn't a murder, right? So the almighty dollar, segregation, where our money, Black money, circulated within our communities, such as a Black Wall Street in Tulsa, Oklahoma, such as a Paradise Valley and a Black Bottom in Detroit, where there were just thriving Black businesses, and in Harlem and other areas around the country. Segregation did, or integration did, stop that circulation of money. And then, it really grew to us wanting to move out of our insular communities, out into suburban areas, and the whole separate but equal. We knew that wasn't the case, so we wanted equality. But we can still circulate our money inside of our communities, dine
So,
inside of our communities,
so
buy inside of our communities.
let,
I mean,
let
just
me.
think, just think about this. And I don't know if you experienced this, because Dozell is older than I am.
I just had my Medicare birthday, Jen.
Definitely when our parents were growing up. I don't know if you would have experienced it, but our parents would have. Ask your mother. They could not go into a store in some areas of this country and try on a pair of shoes to see if they fit. They would have to draw an outline of their foot and try to see, push it into the inside of a shoe to see if it would fit. And if they bought those shoes and they didn't fit, well, SOL, because white people didn't want us, Black people, trying on clothes, trying on shoes, trying on anything, right? Now, we weren't treated that way in our own shops, that we had boutiques and shops, and many of us were great seamstresses and tailors. But when we went into the larger stores, the bigger stores, or even in a small town, if you will, where there was kind of a general store situation, think about the indignity of that. I can't try on this shoe. I have on a sock, or I have on a
Yeah,
stocking. I mean,
Janet,
just think
you
about
know,
that.
for you and I, that would be an indignity. But I think for our ancestors who endured that, they just accepted that as a way of life for that era. I want to ask you this. We got like 7 minutes before we got to say bid adieu. And thank you all for bearing with us. And we want you to tell everybody about this show, and we'll be willing, Janet. I know Janet will come back with us. We'll do a part two. Um, because of the logistics tonight, we're just grateful to you, Janice, and the Madam Producer and company for pulling us together. Don't want to pit one brother or sister against another, but I want you. You're talking about dollars and the impact of dollars. Michael Jordan who is a billionaire, likely because of his affair, his affiliation with Nike, with J's, the Jordan being the signature brand. When asked why does he not speak out more about social injustice, particularly in our community, then and even now, you know what his response was? Republicans buy Jordans too. Okay, now, so just suppose that against LeBron James and Dwayne Wade, who both at that time in both of their careers had great marketing contracts with various companies. They took a stand, a very stand on a very controversial issue, very controversial issue. It wasn't well known. We didn't know at the time all everything. We were right there in Orlando and didn't even know that this murder had occurred until like about the end of the next week when we had gotten back home. So LeBron and D Wade and the Heat immediately responded, and they had money on the line, but they didn't think about that. Colin Kaepernick, he was doing a little advertising. He had just come out of the Super Bowl, lost a narrow victory, a narrow defeat in the Super Bowl. He put that on the line. It backfired against him. It backfired against Kurt Flood. James and LeBron, they survived it as far as being popular and being able to be marketable. But Jordan wouldn't even put it to the test. So I mean, I'm not saying that the push to make fun of money, uh, cast aspersions at him. Only to say this is an example of somebody who doesn't put it online, and these are people who have it Colin Kaepernick's situation at a major expense, a career. They keep trotting him out now and giving him cursory tryouts, which he's done. His career is done. Inactivity for anybody, particularly somebody at his age, just you pretty much lost your effectiveness. So just talk about that in a brief minute or so before we get out of here.
Well, I will say the way that the Ukrainian president said to the United States, do more, and the United States sent more billions of dollars. We're over $13 billion that has gone over to that war effort, which is a proxy war on the US behalf. I would say do more to those people who have a megaphone. Now, we don't know what they might do behind the scenes. Um, they might be doing something that's really revolutionary behind the scenes, but if we don't see it, we don't know that it's happening. And so, what I would say to Black Americans who are tired of being taken for granted in our economy, in our education systems, just even in your private life, the indignities that you may suffer just being Black in America, just being Black shopping, just being Black driving, all of the indignities that we suffer, pull back your money. Stop buying those items that are branded by individuals that you don't think are doing enough. Because at some point, you got to ask yourself, how much money is enough? And we know that people like these celebrated athletes are making millions and millions and now crossing over into billions of dollars. And we don't want to take any money out of any of their families' mouths, any food off of their kitchen table, their plate, but they certainly have more than many. And so when you talk about a Colin Kaepernick, he was principled. He was silently raising attention to the problems that Black men, and he's a mixed race man. He's half white, half Black, but he was raising attention. And he did, I won't say that he lost, he stood within his convictions. And, he has started a family. I understand he just had his first child with his partner. So he's moving on with his life. And it's unfortunate that other athletes or individuals of that prominence did not follow suit. We understand that they might lose a contract, an endorsement, etc. But, that's basically enslavement. And, you can't wash this off. We're Black all day and all night. And we stand to be accosted, arrested, or killed, particularly Black men, even those who are 6'7", 6'8", 7 feet tall, they still can be accosted by the a vigilante police officer. So they should give that some thought and do more. I just say do more. Um, Again,
Yes.
I just bring up the one who really put it all on the line, Muhammad Ali. He stood in his conviction, and he was stripped of everything. And
We
he's like, I've made money, and now I'll just live a basic life. What's wrong with living a basic life, particularly when you got
so
money in the bank?
we don't want to be remiss for our sisters. I know you mentioned earlier Eartha Kitt appearing at the White House with Lady Bird Johnson and being banned from the nation and stuff like that. But we also want to mention, hello Gina. We also want to mention heading out of here that Jane Fonda, who should have appeared on the poster, um, she put it on the line. She had a very lucrative movie career, and we can't determine whether or not what her loss was, but you can believe she did lose because she stood out and protested a lot of social injustice causes. She stood for the protests of them, such
Hmm.
as the environment and nuclear places being placed in too close to residential areas. So we
Yeah,
just want to shout her out. And of course, we know Maya Angelou. A lot of her poems were protest poems, and um, people like that put it out there, put it on the line. We know she was in commercials. She risked that income, and I mean, our hats. I know collectively, Jan, our hats are off to people who have put it on the line, just as you'll be doing uh, in a few weeks when you go to the Capitol protesting for a study to stop for reparations, Dozy, reparations. So, listen, you have a closing comment, and this has been a whirlwind. Quick, we've done it quickly. I can't tell you thanks enough uh, on this topic. Do you have a closing comment, please, ma'am?
well, I just say once again, stand in your conviction. I do. There are a number of things that I have been, um, that I have risked for speaking out. Too black, too strong. That whole thing. But that's who I am, and it's always, I think of those who put it on the line. My parents. Our parents who put things on the line to better our future, and I'm very, very grateful. And so, at a certain point, I just ask people, just like that president of the Ukraine, do more, and we'll all benefit from it.
Thanks, Jan. Uh, thanks for taking this ride with us tonight. I've asked instead of our usual, we didn't do a shout out at the beginning of the program or the midway point like we normally do because we started at the normal midway point. But we're going to go out with an iconic photograph of you're going to see the recently late great Bill Russell. You're going to see Jim Brown, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, who are still with us, the great Muhammad Ali. You see Sidney Poitier in the back. You see Rahman Ali, that's Ali's brother. Uh, and you see several other less prominently known black men who are standing behind these iconic figures of athletes. And again, Poitier, that's not his picture, but Belafonte and Poitier are two that should go right in there who put it on the line. At that point, they were standing with Ali during the initiation of his refusal to accept the draft, and in a sense, ending what Jan just reminded you of a brilliant boxing career. And so, shout out to them, and shout out to the millions of others who we never know their names. Some of them will be in the protest with Janis in a few weeks. We won't know them prominently, but they have something that they're putting on the line. And shout out to those who have looked at the drastic causes. Everything wasn't as prominent as the George Floyd murder, but there were some local issues, and somebody put it on the line. The Charles Cherries in Daytona Beach, the Rutledge Pearsons, all of those who stood for civil rights and for protests. And guess what? If they needed to be an advocating voice in 2022 for a cause that is so-called across the track, don't think they would sit down. We see Reverend Al doing that every day on his program and also on other programs across the network. Jan, thank you tonight. shout out. Thank you to our team, our producers. They're going to close with a commercial advertising a fabulous product. More GoGigaWorld.com. We'll be back with you next Monday. I'm in the studio, and we'll be back next week. I think next week we're going to look at cruising. We have an awesome band that's been on one of the large Royal Caribbean ships. We're going to bring an interview with the lead singer of the band Temperature, and we're going to bring on a dear lady who is retired. She's in her mid-70s, and she cruises once a month. We want to talk about that. Thank you. God bless you. Thank you for signing on with us. Thank you for waiting with us through our tardiness tonight. Thank you, Jan. That's all I can say. You've never said no. I don't want to risk that on the roll of dice, but thank you. Love you, cuz. God bless you,
Take care. Be
Dozell.
safe down there.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you. Bless you, sis. Y'all be safe, South Florida. Be safe, Central Florida. Be safe, West Florida. Be safe, Panhandle. Be safe, Duval. We out.